Hello and welcome to the MacGuffin, and
The Red Herring.
I'm the MacGuffin,
And I'm the Red Herring.
and we're here to discuss Lord of the Rings of Power. I think the show suffers,
And I love it.
so there's a lot of hater rants out there, and there's a handful of people that enjoy it, and so we're here to discuss both. Hope you like what we have to say, and if not, let us know in the comments. This week's episode of The MacGuffin and the Red Herring brought to you by Ye Old Gym, personal training and online fitness coaching. Find us on Instagram. Episode 4. We are using new recording software, so if it's better, let us know. If it's worse, let us know. If it's the same, let us know. Yeah. Alright, so my first note is in Numenor. Is that because the episode starts in Numenor? We'll find out in just a second. Do you have notes before Numenor?
I think number one, with no notes below it, Numenor. So I'm guessing that's the first place we start with. I suspect this episode is going to be a lot of me just kind of saying, this is what I got out of this shot.
Yeah. Meh. Alright, so mine starts out with, why are they so threatened by just one elf? We've kind of talked about this a little bit.
Real quick disclaimer, maybe we can put this at the front.
Okay.
As of recording this right now, season 2 has come out.
Yes.
Both of us are caught up on it, with as many episodes are out.
We will do our best not to reference it during these episodes.
Exactly. And a lot of times, where I might have said, we'll have to wait to find out what that means. Now I have to go, this is what I thought while watching season 1, as of season 1, and then, I don't know, maybe we'll just do our best with them.
Just keep saying, we'll have to wait and see, and we'll just pretend we haven't already seen. I have a degree in theater. I should be able to pull that little bit of acting off.
Yeah.
I also have a degree in singing, so I should be a much better singer than what I actually am, but you know. So this scene, we've got Upstart, this guy, complaining that there's one elf who doesn't get tired, so he's worried that she's going to do all the work in Numenor and everyone's going to not have jobs. Which again, so I said, why are they so threatened by one elf? Just tell them she was brought by the sea, and the sea is always right.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say that doesn't. That's one of those things that's like, we've already talked about how this is kind of a saying that some people put a lot of stock in, but then other people apparently do not put a lot of stock in. That happens in real life too,
Mm-hmm.
but I also think these guys, what they're referencing, and we haven't figured out what an actual date is on what we're watching, but I know in the canon, we've got a lot crammed into where they're at mentally right now. They're framing this season in the most chaotic, the pivotal moment,
Mm-hmm.
right? But in actual history, as we've kind of seen already, Numenor and the elves, the people of Numenor and the elves were really hunky-dory for a long time, and they kind of slowly grew apart, and then a great leader kind of came in and kind of, they slowly started to peel away, and then people took advantage of that, that fear that elves were trying to control them, and so we've taken all this history and we've crunched it down into all of a sudden right now people have always been this paranoid.
Yeah.
So we're in a tinderbox right now, even though this is supposed to take place over
Yeah.
generations.
And as much as I hate lore dumps and voiceovers, you did a lore dump voiceover about why elves are in Middle Earth now and why they're at war with Sauron and why Galadriel is hunting Sauron. Just every time you meet a new group of people, every time you meet a new group of people,
Mm-hmm.
just slap on another voiceover of, this is the generic these are the bullet points of our history so that you understand where we are now. If you're
That
gonna
would've been cool.
If you're gonna do it, do it instead of trying to make it feel like
Actually, I concede to that point. I think that would have been really cool to have Galadriel do that whenever she's explaining to definitely not Sauron while he's feigning ignorance about where are we.
Yeah.
Like if she just did like a voiceover lore dump for everyone to understand the history of it,
or even just a dialogue point with Halbrand saying like, "Oh, we're in Numenor. You know, relations between the Numenorians and the elves have been troublesome for centuries."
Yeah.
Then we have like, okay, there's reason for all these people to be so concerned that one elf is here.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, like, I think it couldn't have been Halbrand because in that moment he was feigning ignorance.
Yeah.
And also like, meta knowledge. They can't tip their hands to the audience that Halbrand knows more than any other Humie.
Yeah. So if Galadriel explains to him, like, oh great. And then here I have good point, Chancellor, because Pharazôn says, but now one elf, a castaway, could threaten us.
Yeah. And
then my next note is, does he just always travel with wine carriers, with waiters carrying drink trays?
We do kind of get a nod to that later on. That essentially, he's always kind of he's got people always nearby that are controllers. Whenever he like gives a nod later on, this is another episode I think, but like he's having a candid conversation with his son, and then he just like gives someone a nod. And everyone clears out. Like that doesn't.
That I'm fine with because it's like, oh, he's got like Secret Service effectively that are with him. They're just kind of keeping an eye on things. He wasn't. But here it's like he finishes this speech and then he says drinks all around, and like 5 people with drink trays come out while they're in just a random courtyard.
To be fair, his son did come and tell him that they have a problem here, and so there's a little gap there in time where he could have made preparations to follow him up.
And then, so we've seen one person with like 4 drinks on her tray.
For
a massive 300 people. Yeah, exactly. So like, if you're gonna do it, you have to do it. You can't. And now again, like 3 people in the background have drinks. Are they just the most important people there? That one guy with a drink is bald and has a beard, so I can see why he would be important.
Yeah. So this is one of those things that like I think I tend to agree with you. Like, how much did that add? I think it would have been more potent just to have people shouting Pharazôn after him delivering a really poignant speech.
Yeah.
Like he didn't need to say drinks all around. I think it's supposed to call back to like Halbrand and like how manipulating people through things that we in the real world identify as like, oh, that's kind of manipulative. And you want to lower people's awareness by buying them a drink and kind of like placate them.
Yeah.
Like that as a strategy, we in the real world can be like, oh, look, maybe he's not completely on the level.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think that scene works so much well without putting in the problematic wine glasses.
Yeah.
So I'll concede that point.
My next note with Galadriel, Elendil, and the Queen is Elendil's funny. I don't know what joke he tells, but Elendil's funny.
He goes like, well, actually, as petty lord.
Yeah. And then I said, the Queen listens when you present a calm, polite argument instead of just making entitled demands. Who would have thought? And then she starts making demands to see the king, and I get it now because she tried doing it the diplomatic way, and now she's appealing because she's like, how do I know you actually have any authority? Take me to the king. So now when she's like, hey, I'm going to make a more stern demand, I can respect that because she tried doing it the gentle, polite way first, as opposed to the vast majority of interactions we see with her leading up to this. It's just her saying, you will do this for me, and trying to force people's hands. And like when she pulled a dagger on Elendil in, I think, the last episode or whatever, it's like he was just innocently standing on a pillar trying to help her, and she pulls a dagger on him. But I'm backtracking.
I mean, like, she's not a peaceful. She's not the kind of character that would ever use diplomacy at this point in her character arc. So this is her showing like little baby steps, little learning baby steps. So, in my opinion, like, based off of where the character was starting at the beginning of this season, and the fact that she's learning a little bit now, like, that's character growth.
Yeah.
But you're right. She was acting irrational in the previous scene.
Yeah.
But that's also her character flaw. That's her character trait.
And again, I've reflected on this a lot, and I think that I would have far less issue with that being her character if this was happening 800 years ago. If all of this was happening much closer to when her brother died. But at this point, again, you've had centuries going on, 1,000 years to process this. Like, you should have had some measure of emotional growth after this much time.
I mean, for a human, maybe. But we've even talked about how elves, time moves slower. And also, she's literally been focusing on revenge for 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Like, trying to teach an old dog new tricks. Like, she's literally been completely absorbed in revenge for her brother for 1,000 years. That's a lot of, like, out in the wilderness with soldiers hunting orcs for 1,000 years. That could make you pretty callous.
Soldiers who also, like, especially by the end, weren't really supportive of her, though. You would think that some of them, over the course of 1,000 years, would have tried to talk her down.
Well, apparently they did, but...
Yeah.
So
I don't have any notes about this scene on the boat, but I am going to make a note of... I really like Elendil hearing... not Elendil. Isildur. Hearing the, like, voices across the waves. Because you keep talking about how these people base decisions because they're getting these magical, otherworldly callings to do so, but we don't see that, so it just feels like them making irrational decisions.
Yeah.
But here, we see that we are shown that he sees or hears these magical callings and voices. So when he makes decisions based on that, it makes sense to us, the viewer, even though it doesn't make sense to the people he tells in the world. But that, I think, is fine. Because, again, it makes sense to us on the outside watching because we see that he's getting these mystical messages. So I think had they done more of that with Galadriel hunting Sauron, with Nori and totally not Gandalf, with other characters, then I would have been more on board with it.
I see.
Maybe they'll do some of that in season 2. We don't know. We will see.
I was gonna say that's one thing that, like, I can't remember if I've touched on this already, but, like, Galadriel has some gifts for prophecy, which they haven't acknowledged in season 1, so we don't really know whether or not they're including it. It seems like, so I've definitely, while watching this, or especially while watching this the first couple times through, I attributed a lot of her kind of, like, knowing for sure things that she shouldn't know. Like, just her certainty of kind of, like, she's been having premonitions. She's been having, like, she's been having all of these things that she doesn't quite know what they are, is what I'm guessing. But, like, they haven't really, at this point, they haven't really concretely said whether or not she has those powers that she does in the book and how far along they are in development.
Yeah. Maybe we will get an explanation for that in season 2. I should stop saying that because I'm going to ruin season 2 for everybody.
We can edit it out.
So I have here Adar, possibly the best character in the show, well motivated, well articulated, well delivered. Is Adar Sauron? And that's the only notes I have for this scene.
Yeah, I love this sequence as an intro to a character. A lot of people liked him. This is kind of one of those things of, like, this is another sequence where this is why I give these people more credit than other people do, is because I'm like, yeah, look, this is a fantastic sequence, an amazing intro to a character. There's a lot of tension There's a more specific example of this, but something that I took away of it on like my fourth or fifth watching of this season was Adar. Here's where I'm conflicted. There's two readings of Adar.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is either he is subservient to Sauron and conscious of that, which has a few problematic scenes, but kind of matches the Sauron as a 4D chess player. Mm-hmm. Or there's also
and quick note, if this is the first time you're tuning into us, we are doing full-blown spoilers. We are talking about stuff that happens in the last episode, in this episode, if we think it fits. So if you're worried about spoilers, just be aware of that. So go ahead.
Yeah. But also, there's also a potential reading of him where maybe he's obviously a bad guy. He's obviously coming from a place of darkness, but maybe he is on a path of redemption for the orcs. And they do not concretely say which he is in season 1. Mm-hmm. So, like, we just have to wait to find out. But, yeah, they definitely set it up even in this sequence of, like, there's a little bit of good in him still. Like, when he goes out and he looks at the sun later on. Mm-hmm. There's a couple of sequences later on, and I'll bring it up more specifically. But, yeah, even here you get just a little hint of, like, he's clearly bad.
Yeah.
But maybe there's also still a little bit of good in him. Mm-hmm. And maybe he's caring for the orcs.
Yeah.
That's a good trait.
Yeah.
So,
honestly, from a who behaves in a more morally upstanding position argument, mm-hmm. I would say Adar is one of the most good characters on the show.
I mean,
everything he does is selfless. It's for his people. It is for giving his children a home.
Yeah, but he also enslaves people and kills people and uses brutal punishment when he doesn't get what he wants. So,
I mean, you know, if you want to make an omelet.
I have some questions for you, Lance.
We can talk about that later. Also, I would like to know, where are the orcs getting all the alligator skins? This doesn't seem like the climate or the region where you get that many large creatures with scales.
Maybe they're dragon hunters. That would be rad.
That'd be impressive.
I bet you could probably wardrobe a lot of orcs with one dragon.
With one dragon, yeah. Even one of the small ones,
mm-hmm.
like Smaug.
Yeah.
he was teensy compared to...
Yeah.
Alright. Next notes I have is... Oh, one last note here, because I'm going to bring this up later.
Oh.
Adar releases Arondir?
Mm-hmm.
Adar releases Arondir.
Mm-hmm.
Goodness gracious, those names. It's like in Game of Thrones when everyone in the same family has a name that's like 2 letters different from each other.
Yeah.
Like, how am I supposed to keep these people straight? Anyway, Adar releases Arondir and is like, hey, I have a message I want you to go deliver.
Mm-hmm.
That, I think, is really, really great that they put that in because of something it sets up that I will touch on a later scene. That is something I normally would complain about, but in this case, they actually justified it, so it's fine.
I actually also really like that line, just talking about like a themes and like getting into the poetry, because this is a meeting of 2 characters who are actually very, very similar, and they kind of see that in each other. I think the reason why Adar picks him as a messenger is because he kind of sees in him, like they both see in each other, like, oh, you like the humans and I like the orcs. Like, I care more about these people who are not necessarily my people, but and I'm not supposed to like them, but like, you care about the humans, I care about the orcs. Like, they see that in each other and they're like, okay, I know where you're coming from. They don't have to like fully trust each other, but they're like, I understand you enough to trust you with this task.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really cool. Also, there's one of the other themes that I just see throughout this whole season is there's so many unanswered questions. People will start a question and the other character just moves past it. Happens all the time.
Yeah.
Is it like one of the big ones that Aaron, what's his name again?
Arendir.
Arendir
Yeah.
asks of Adar is like, why do they call you father? That would be great information as a viewer. There's so many of those questions that like they're just about to answer this, or maybe like we're supposed to just answer it on our own through watching it. But I think the writers put it in there as like a clever little tool to be like, we know you're thinking this, or if you're not, you should be asking this. But it also kind of comes across as a little bit annoying. It's like, why do they keep asking? Like, I did want to know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
And we keep just breezing past them.
See, I like that he at least asked the question. I'm fine with them cutting off before the answer so that we still have the question.
Yeah.
But again, this is the complaint that I have with the why do you need the forge built by Spring? Like, Elrond needs to ask that question. Even if the scene cuts off before we get the answer, he needs to ask that question.
Yeah.
Let's see if I played too far ahead. My notes on the humans in the tower with the food. Bronwyn's philosophy, take no risks, stay safe. Everyone else's philosophy is take risks, greater potential reward. Overall good scene. Although, why didn't we bring the food that was in the cellar with us in the first place if we knew we were abandoning the town and holing up in the tower?
Yeah.
I know why. It's so that they could have this scene with Theo and the boy running back to
Well,
town. But
also we have Waldrig. We have to keep in mind that Waldrig is obviously the main henchman. He's the bad guy. He's trying to make things dire for the humans. Essentially, he wants to be taken over by Sauron, and he thinks he's coming. So he doesn't want this defense to be successful. But he's also positioned himself as the kitchen. So that's why when they come to him and they say, "Where's the rest?" he goes like, "This is the rest." But it's coming from Waldrig, so you're not supposed to trust it.
Or Waldrig could have brought all of the food and leveraged that to put himself in a position of power instead of saying, "We don't have food, she's a bad leader."
Yeah, that's what he does do.
Say, "We have food because I'm a good leader."
I mean, maybe, but I'm just saying, like, based on what's there, like, it's the lack of food is coming from Waldrig, who we can't really trust, and we know that.
Yeah.
So he plays such a great henchman in this whole season.
Yeah.
I really like him.
But again, I'm saying if his whole thing is trying to get people to side with him so that he can get everyone to side with Sauron, wouldn't it make sense for him to have been the one that showed up and brought everything to take care of people and said, "Hey, since I'm the one that provided for you, clearly I have a better plan for this situation, so you should follow me."
They would have to construct circumstances around that. So I mean, they could have that could have been
I think they have
story.
to construct circumstances anyway. So
yeah.
Why not
I mean,
do it in a way that doesn't make every single person in town look like a moron that couldn't remember we might need food?
well, I'm assuming some time has passed. So they got there, they're unpacking.
But
They say,
again,
where's the rest of the food? Well, we've eaten it all.
they never show us accurately how much time has passed.
Yeah,
So
that's
we
true.
don't get that. Like, if that's what you're doing, then you need to show us that time has passed. We need to experience that in some way.
That's what I got from it. So I again, that's one of those things. Is like I gave them the benefit of the doubt because when they came in and I saw all the people trying to live there and they started talking about food rations, I was like, oh yeah, that would be a problem. And then they tried to do the zombie run. I did love that he kind of what's his name? Theo becomes a bit of a bully after kind of like being in the presence of Waldrig, and kind of they have this moment of like stillness between them. It's another one of those Dark Whispers thing where it's like it probably would have been better if they had more of like a clear like hearing the corruption kind of like seep into his soul. But like Theo's being cool, and then like in the presence of Waldreg, there's just like this silent moment of like you can see him just kind of like building and becoming like a bully. He becomes a bully to his friend and forces him to come with him by calling him like a coward or something like that. And it's another one of those moments of like just, you know, cool. It was a really cool. I loved everything in that tower.
Is that because he's being corrupted, or is that because he's a hormonal teenage boy and they tend to be jerks anyway?
Yeah, probably both. I think in Tolkien's universe, he might conflate the two. Fair enough. I do love how theatrical this orc is in particular. he gets his cape and he flings it over his head, like so dick dastardly.
So here, where's the sword? Did that big blade that grew out disappear already?
I don't know.
Is
it on his belt? I don't know if we ever see for sure.
But again, I'm saying like that grew into a longsword length blade.
Yeah.
Does he not? That's something not easily concealed.
Yeah, I don't know. Let's see if they have a wider. Let's see if they have a wider angle. I can't recall.
No, he's hiding under the water.
We don't get a lot of shots so far. Okay.
Then he pops out, and an orc certainly wouldn't like throw a rock down there or something just to like see if we hear anything. And then here again, I have like so a little cloud coverage is enough for the orcs. Be louder coming out of the water. Like the orc barely disappears, and he bursts out gasping for air. Like if the orc heard the bucket hit you in the head, he probably heard you gasping for air when you came out of the water.
Yep.
And again, they're so inconsistent about when the orcs can or can't be in the sunlight. Does it have to be direct sunlight? Is a little cloud coverage enough? There's just a lot of back and forth there.
I mean, I think these are all fine points to make, but I try not to be too pedantic about it, you know, like
I tried not to during the first episode, but then as it got further and further in and I noticed the same little things over and over again. There's a scene in Scrubs where JD is training a new doctor. I forget the new doctor's name. But there's this montage of doctor makes a mistake, JD says something about it, and Carla says, "Relax, JD, it's just one mistake." And they do this, a dozen times. It's like 4 times, but the idea is that it happens all day long. And then finally at the end of it, Carla says, "Relax, JD, it's just one mistake." And he snaps at her and he's like, "Yes, they're all just one mistake, but when you add them up, it makes like 4 million mistakes."
Yeah.
So again, here it's like, yeah, each one on its own is pretty small, could be ignored as fairly insignificant, but when it happens so frequently throughout so much content, that's where it starts to just degrade over time.
That's a fair point. No, I won't rebuttal it because I think it's a great point to make.
We're back in Eregion. Again, we have no time scale. It feels like it's only been a few days. That seems like a huge amount of progress for only a few days.
Yep. So, like, mentally, I was like, okay, this has been like a month. It's kind of like, that's what my brain told me because I was just looking at like, they're in progress. So in my mind, I filled in the gap and I was like, this is like a month later. But one thing that this episode, this whole series struggles with is the passage of time. Because
in Numenor, what is happening takes place over like 3 days based on the deal they've made with the Queen. And in the time that Galadriel got to Numenor, he has gone to the dwarves, come back, and they've made all this progress on the Forge. In the time that Galadriel's been in Numenor, that humans in the Southlands have evacuated the town and gone to the tower.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want it to feel like, hey, all of these months or all of these events are a month or so later, and that's why they're running out of food, and that's why they've made so much progress on the forge, then don't set up a very specific timeline in another part of the same story that you're following.
Yeah. So I think like passage of time is problematic for this series in general, because they're talking about before this season one's over, they have to have constructed this tower, which, you know, Elrond rightly says this is impossibly fast to build this.
Yeah.
So we are given an excuse, kind of like a loophole, be like, oh yeah, gonna build this. This is all gonna happen a lot faster than it would in regular life. Okay, but like just in general, I think most people kind of felt like, what's happening? It comes to a head in one particular scene, which I know that we're going to talk about at great length, but like where you just have to kind of accept that all of these things are happening and unfolding in different parts of the world at a rate, and then not knowing when and where they're going to reconvene is the drama of it. It makes it more emotionally impactful to have like not knowing when they're going to collide and then seeing them collide, but also like from a just kind of like wanting to understand where we are, like, you know, understanding real passage of time. Like it just gets awkward sometimes.
Yeah.
So I totally feel that as a note across the board.
Yeah. And then I have, why does it need to be built by spring? Is Celebrimbor Sauron? And then we're back in Khazad-dûm again. It feels like we instantly travel between Eregion and Khazad-dûm, even though on the map they're hundreds of miles apart. But now,
Actually, no, Eregion and the Khazad-dûm are really close. They're actually deliberately close. Because Eregion was built close to Khazad-dûm.
in the map they showed the first time they traveled there, it looked like they were really far apart. Eregion to that's not how you spell.
It's supposed to be very close together, per the lore, and I think in the show. I hope they did good in the show. But literally in the lore, Eregion is built to be close to the dwarves. It's kind of like a central hub in Middle Earth.
Eregion. Well, this has Eregion as like a region, not as a city location, but the region does butt up against.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's like, I forget where exactly it's supposed to lay, but it lays along like a trade river that's supposed to be like, the reason they set it up there was so that it could be close, like a central hub for all the goods.
Yeah. And then I have world building fantasy colloquialism. That's a recipe for strong gravy. Like, what does that mean? I like strong gravy, but she says it like it's a bad thing.
I did love the kids doing their nursery rhyme, and he picks up on it.
Yeah.
It's a cool little, like, this is a note that you gave to Galadriel of like, I want to see her using her powers of elven perception.
Yeah.
And we see so much more of Elrond using his powers of elven perception, and I love this sequence and how it gets rewarded later on because of that, because he's like,
Yeah.
wait a second,
Yeah.
I know the password.
Yeah. I did really like that. I have a note about that later. And then I say overall good scene. I thought there was good confrontation that was well addressed and handled. I just didn't like the recipe for strong gravy line.
Yeah.
And I have how well can elves hear, because first of all, Disa tells Elrond in this scene that Durin is super far away and it's like a 3-day climb to get wherever he is. Which we know that she's lying, but if she's lying to him, you'd think they'd do a better job hiding it than standing in the middle of a bridge, easily visible from loads of places, especially for an elf with their ability to see around corners and super hearing.
Mm-hmm.
So
This is kind of one of those things. It's like some time has passed. They're getting caught up. I assume this is like much later that day.
Oh, see, I think it's like
at night.
she finishes her conversation with Elrond, goes outside, and like brings him lunch.
I love that shot. I just wanted to make a quick note of that. Sorry.
Which
the Durin in profile shot.
Mm-hmm.
It's so unnecessary.
Yeah.
But holy cow, I love it as it's such a dwarven shot because it's a little bit kooky.
Yeah. I think the cinematography with this overall is good. I think their DPs did a good job.
Mm-hmm.
There are elements of it. Oh, here. See his helmet open?
Yeah.
So I have... So there's a dwarf guard approaches Elrond while he's spying on Disa and Durin. I say, how does the dwarf helmet open? I like that it opens so that, they can have lunch and whatever. Stay hydrated. But how does it open? And then, why doesn't he close it again? At the end of the scene, he just walks off with his mask open. And I know why. It's because they could rig it to open, but they couldn't rig it to close. So he just walks off with his helmet open. But how does it open? He doesn't, reach up and open the mask. It just springs open. Like Iron Man telling Jarvis to open his mask. They're all one thing, but when you put them all together, it's like 4 million things. Here I like the rhythm of the kid's song being the secret to open the door. Then Elrond's given Durin crap about keeping secrets and not being a good friend. And I'm like, Durin is a prince. If he's keeping secrets, they may not be his to share with just a friend. A good friend wouldn't say secrets don't make friends. I think that it would be more like what Lucius Fox says in Batman. He says, if you don't tell me exactly what you're doing when I'm masked, I don't have to lie. But don't think of me as an idiot. You can just say, look, I can understand and respect that based on your position, you probably have to keep some secrets from me. Mm-hmm. But just know that I know you're keeping those secrets. It's fine. I understand. But again, don't treat me like I'm not aware of the situation. As opposed to trying to guilt his friend into sharing that.
I think that's a little bit of trying to get some of the morality sprinkled in here. Mm-hmm. But I don't disagree with you, in a real world scenario, but I think it is, it's a flawed line meant to come from a flawed friend. I don't know. It does match his character, I think. I think Elrond, he's a master of manipulation, and he tries to use it for good here, but he's clearly, he doesn't know his own power. He doesn't know his own power of persuasion, and he uses it a little ham-fisted. We see that throughout this, throughout their friendship, really. Elrond kind of uses his understanding of psychology to kind of throw to manipulate his friends, to manipulate his coworkers. He does that,
which makes him not a good person.
It doesn't make him not a good person. It just means that he has this gift that sometimes he's that is his strength and his weakness, as they say.
I think it makes him not a good person. I think Adar is a better person than Elrond.
Adar literally enslaves people and kills people. Elrond tries to get people to do the best thing for them.
Elrond tricks people into being slaves without them realizing what's happening. At least Adar's honest.
Persuades them. Oh my god.
This scene I have a lot of notes on, but I want to see where they fit, so I'm actually going to unmute and play for a second. Plus, that'll give me something big to cut out of the video later, so I feel like I'm actually doing some editing. He says it's lighter than silk, stronger than iron. As a weapon, it would best the proudest blades. Lighter doesn't necessarily make weapons better. You need mass in order to break armor, in order to press guards, in order to cleave, in order to cut into things. Like, you need some force behind your weapon. So it needs to be light enough for you to maneuver it, but it needs enough mass behind it for the speed that you're carrying through it to matter. Like, I can whip someone wicked hard with a Nerf sword, but there's no mass behind it, so it wouldn't damage anything.
I mean, if we're going to be a dick about it, like, you can put other metals in there. You can put weights at it.
Yeah.
Like, he's not saying the whole thing has to be cardboard. Like, I assume that their smithies would make it.
No, I'm not saying that it would be flimsy. I'm saying you need. That's why, like, heavyweight boxers hit harder than lightweight boxers, even though lightweight boxers hit faster. It's because there's more mass.
But you're conflating that because this material is light, therefore it would make bad weapons. But that is not true, because he's talking about it has this really rare unique of being strong and light. So you could make great armor out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you can also
light armor is great as long as it maintains its strength.
You can still make great weapons out of it because you can control the weight and balance that much more. I was being a jerk about it.
You can control. I mean, can you though?
Yes, because you can put the weights wherever you want them, made out of whatever material you want, and the bulk of it is a lightweight. So it's always easier to add stuff to it than, oh gosh, I have this.
No, when you're making weapons, it's much easier to cut stuff off. When you're making swords, it is immensely easier to grind things down and cut things off than to add.
Sure, like as a physical act, yes. Yeah. But I'm saying, like, if you're trying to make a specific weight, like you're like working with the raw materials, it's impossible to get things any lighter than the stuff that you're working with.
Yeah.
So it's better to start light and add to get the right weight that you want, rather than in the places that you want, rather than, and being like, well, I can only ever do this distribution of weight because it's just this heavy. That's the material I'm working with.
But there's a huge discrepancy in distribution of weight in real swords based on how you taper the blade from the guard to the point, how you distal taper. So distal taper is that this is the blade and this is the edge, and this is the point, this is the guard. Distal taper is it's thicker at the guard and drops off toward the point.
Sure.
And then you get profile taper, which is the other way. So if this is the sharp edge, this is the point, this is the guard, how it tapers off this way. So, like, you guys can't see this, but you can see the swords on my wall here. The one on the far right is way too heavy because it has no taper in any form whatsoever, and the spine of it is super thick. The one next to it is way too light because it's thin and it has too much taper in too many places. But I specifically got that one for competition cutting, so it's supposed to be light and super thin. The one in the very, very middle is probably the best balance of all realms as far as taper is concerned for the type of blade that it is. And then the big one next to it is just big. You guys can kind of see, I have essentially two of the same sword on the end of the wall here. So the last one that you guys can see in frame there is, it's really big, but it's actually pretty light and pretty maneuverable because the blade is thin and it has a lot of distal taper. So it's thick by the guard, but it drops off significantly toward the end. So you can still control a lot of it with just steel.
So what the point I'm trying to make is this is a very flexible ore. That's what that's the point that Durin's making.
Yeah.
So I don't know. This is a moment when I feel like, and I don't even know if this necessarily is your observation or coming from other people. That definitely heard this on other places online as well, where people who were being pedantic were like, technically a light blade isn't a good blade. It's like, well,
If
yes,
it's too
obviously,
light, it's not good.
obviously you want to make it the right weight.
Mhm.
We're talking about he can make it perfect because they're starting so light, and they can perfect it. They can do whatever they want with it. That's what he's talking about here. And the fact that you just conflated the fact that it's light and that they can make great weapons out of it, and then somebody goes, well, actually, you don't want light blades. You're just being a dick.
You don't want blades that are too light.
Yeah.
You want them to be light enough to
You're just
maneuver.
looking for things to be wrong with the show at that point. Because the point that
But the
Duran's
show
making,
makes it so easy to find things that are wrong.
He's not conflating these points. You guys are conflating the points. That's what I'm saying.
Then he needs to use a word other than lighter.
No,
Better-
because
say-
he's describing the qualities of it.
Say better balanced
And it's still a good
blades.
point.
Say better balanced blades, because that's where your argument comes down.
I mean, it's for me, it doesn't matter because he's talking about how good this material is as a resource. So he talks about making a weapon because there's a little bit of poetry in there too, where everyone's worried about making weapons in this show, and like how weapons can be used pretty much just for one thing, for bad things. And there's a little bit of where his head is at. He's infatuated with it. He's thinking about power. He's thinking about making weapons out of it and stuff. So that's the poetry about it. That's why they chose to go with weapons, I think. But they're just talking about the aspects of it. They're telling you about the cool properties of this ore. And he still makes a valid point about how it would just be a really good material to use in crafting things. And for somebody to go and be a jerk about it and be like, well, actually, I'm going to say that I'm going to imply for you that you think the showrunners must think that light weapons are superior, which is actually wrong because you just want the showrunners to be wrong.
But
That's
we have real world examples of this. Of people wear a lot of titanium armor because titanium is lighter than steel, but just as strong as steel. But titanium swords are terrible because they're too light. So there are real world equivalents to effectively this.
Yeah, and those people are wrong for using too light weapons. And I'm sure that whenever they go sparring with you, they pay the price. But in this show that we're watching, where they're just trying to tell you information and make a poetic point, for you to go actuallyism, it's just like you're just looking for stuff to be wrong. You're not trying to understand the show.
But again, I come back to the same point of if that was the one thing that they got wrong.
They didn't get it wrong. That wasn't wrong. That was a fine piece of dialogue. That was a fine observation. That wasn't wrong.
All right. It is wrong. But we're going to
It's
move
not
forward.
wrong. No, because you're conflating.
I just told you a real world example where exactly what he says does not work.
Yes, but that's not what they're talking about here. That's not what they're talking about here. You want the creators to not know as much about medieval craft as you. Maybe they don't, but it doesn't even matter because that's not the point that they were making here.
Anyway, he says the reason they're not mining it is because it's perilous to mine. Isn't all mining perilous?
Yeah.
Like, that, again, seems like...
No, he's saying it's extra perilous. If a dwarf's saying it's perilous, it's got to be extra perilous.
Yeah. And then once again we get Elrond lying about why he came to Khazad-dûm. So there he says, I came because 20 years is far too long to be away from a friend. It's like, no, you came because they needed a forge built, and you thought of who could build the forge. Again, if it had been I needed this project done. I knew you could do it. I wanted to help my friend get some credit and some glory, so I brought this project to you.
Mm-hmm.
Fine.
Yep.
But he keeps saying, I came here for friendship, when he didn't.
Yeah.
Anyway. And then we're back in Numenor. Do you have any other notes about
I think I did, yeah.
Casa Doom before we move on?
I did like that he gave Durin a rare tree, which is a symbol of the elf people, and Durin gave him a rare ore as a symbol of the dwarf people. Again, just a nice little kind of symmetry, nice little bit of poetry in there. But Durin, and I also have a note in here that says Durin is the best boy. He really is, like, in the friendship of, like, Elrond and Durin, like, Elrond does not deserve Durin.
No.
Like, Durin is such a better friend.
Yeah. I did have one more note about swearing on stone. Again, feels like Dragon Age to me, but maybe that's a thing here. Then we're back in Numenor. I say the counselor's son is smooth, good scene. That's the only note I have about him and Iarian.
Yeah. I do want to point out, like, we know this guy's going to be a bad guy, but, like, he's the boss's son hitting on the new intern.
Yeah.
Like, if you needed any more of an example of, like, how he's just the slimiest slime ball. But it was a really smooth line where he's like, if you see any, you'll be the first to know.
Yeah. Now we're in jail. Good advice from Halbrand. What was the good advice he gave her?
Trying to remember. Oh, how to, like, listen. So I have in this sequence,
As much as I admire your...
So Sauron just kind of discloses the strategy he uses, not just here, but, like, for the rest of the whole season. Like, he's always presenting, something. He's letting people tell him what they fear, and then he's, like, offering a solution to control it.
Yeah.
So he like discloses his whole strategy throughout, and I love that.
It's the exact opposite of the Tyrion Lannister approach, which is, what do you want?
Yeah.
Tyrion's always asking you, what do you want? And then they tell him what they want, and then he helps them find a way to get it.
Yep.
This is, what are you afraid of?
Yeah.
Let me help you avoid your fear. It's
Yeah. This is one of those moments, like this whole prison sequence, when I think supports the 4D chess Sauron. Like, he knows kind of who he's dealing with already. The math isn't shown outside of it could be just a little bit of sleuthing there in the conversation, because he's great at getting information from people. Yeah. In a single conversation, but I also kind of think, like, he probably has been whispering, see, he's here, and like he's been around town, so he kind of knows what's going on already.
Or is he just sick of Galadriel and is trying to help her so that she'll go away and leave him alone?
I mean, yes. As he explicitly says, I think in a few lines, or in a couple of sequences.
So I say, good advice from Halbrand. Also good of him to point out her main character flaws that she's had 1,000 years to fix. But so I say, hey, Galadriel is getting her way. She's being shipped back to Middle Earth, according to Pharazôn here. Now, there's a lot in this next little bit. So you'll note the cell that she's in has an outswing door, and then she easily overcomes 3 guards, one of whom I'm pretty sure just, like, jumps into the cell. And then her cell becomes an in-swing door. So, outswing door. Which this guard then shuts. And I think we hear keys locking the gate. I could be wrong. Actually, just to verify that, let's come back and unmute. So, outswing gate. You hear it clang shut. Alright, so we don't hear it lock, but
I wouldn't advise that.
Yeah, just swung inward.
and now it's an in-swing gate when she throws everyone through it. Now, you can make hinges that go both ways, but based on the sound it makes when he shuts the door, that means that he shut the door.
Yeah. So that's one of those. That's one of those choreography. So that's one thing that like. I think a lot of people rightfully point out as like in the sword fighting choreography and stuff. There's a lot of kind of like, it looks pretty, but it's not real.
Yeah. I have a few when we get there.
And like I think that's another one of those things. Is like,
yeah, when we get there, I have a few of those points where I'm like, well, that's not right. But I do actually defend that scene more than other people do. Maybe I'm giving too much benefit of the doubt based on my history. I doubt that's the case. But but I do actually defend a couple of points in that scene that I've seen a lot of complaints about.
Yeah. No, I think that's valid. That is definitely broken.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of one of those things. It's like
He knew exactly where she was going.
But we also get to see Sauron use his strategy right there, which is awesome.
Yeah.
He's like, you're afraid of her and what's about to go down. What if I give you a way to control her? Which is just rad to see it in action right there.
Yeah. I have Isildur's family dynamics are actually well done. And then I don't have a note again until the King's Chamber. Do you have anything for the jail or for this chat with...
No, I don't have anything until Father.
Okay. So, King's Chamber. How did she climb that tower on the outside? How does she break the iron reinforced window? I know elves are all Kryptonian in this. Like, that's a long, smooth tower for her to climb up.
Yep. Sure is.
Just
I can't argue with you there.
And then I have, hey, Galadriel can say please. When does she say please? I have fear speech seems a little lacking in self-awareness. I get that she's just kind of regurgitating what Halbrand already said. Let me unmute for this and see what...
Please.
Oh, there she says please.
So I have a note here on this one. Is like, is impactful as this is supposed to be? Like, we kind of saw it from the Queen's perspective already, and we know why the Queen is horrified that the world that she knows, the city that she loves, the people that she loves are all going to be drowned. So that's why the Queen would be horrified. And then we kind of presume that Galadriel sees the same thing. I would love in this is just like a note, how I think this sequence could have been better is if we showed a little bit more of how horrific it is whenever this is coming through.
Yeah.
So that from the fresh eyes of Galadriel, because we know why the Queen would be horrified at this. Galadriel, we can assume that she can put the pieces together and understand how bad it is, but like I just think it would feel a lot better if we actually got to see more of the vision and got to like stew in a little bit of like how bad this wave that's coming is.
Apparently they had a dialect coach on set teaching them
Someone
like
will never
how to
come
hawk and roll all their
Somewhere
R's. I'm just like, but that, again, for me, that makes it so much worse. But like,
Can you fire that coach?
Numenor.
Sorry.
Numenor, Elrond, Galadriel.
Avoiding this war may be the very thing that brings about your downfall. I will not second guess the gods. My decision is final. A decision based in fear.
Yeah, that's it. So it's like that. So because I'm going to cut all of what we just watched out, Muriel is talking about the downfall of Numenor and how she needs to get rid of Galadriel to protect Numenor, and Galadriel says that you're basing this decision in fear, which I say seems a little lacking in self-awareness, since isn't Galadriel basing her search for Sauron on fear that he's not defeated, in fear that she'll let her brother down, in fear that if she's wrong, she'll have wasted the last millennium in a fruitless pursuit? She does an awful lot of things in fear for chastising someone else for doing something in fear.
I mean, yeah. Like I said, I think the point of the line and the logic behind it is that Galadriel is not afraid to fulfill her duty. So it's when we talk about like what is doing something out of fear. Yeah, she is afraid of things going wrong, and that's what the queen is too.
Yeah.
So that's why I agree with you in that one sense, and that like it's kind of a weird point to chastise her on if you want to use that as an understanding of fear. But really, I would say Galadriel definitely thinks of herself as acting out of bravery. She is afraid of things going wrong, and that's why she feels compelled to complete her duty. Whereas, again, this is the point they were trying to make, and that one line doesn't do it justice. Where the queen is essentially being an isolationist. That's really what a lot of these chapters are about. Is about isolationism and how divided you're easier to conquer. And so the fear that she's talking about is Numenorians are afraid of outside influence. They're afraid of their past. They're afraid of elven influence, and they think if they just keep to themselves, they'll be fine.
Yeah.
So that's the fear that she's talking about. But maybe it would have been better if she used some sort of phrasing of like isolation.
Yeah.
But
Or
it's kind of like one of those things. It's like the meaning and the word, they're using it differently. But it's a cool thing to point out too, because that's.
Or maybe even like stretching out. I know that it's not as soundbitey, and we do love our sound bites in modern culture.
Sure.
But maybe something like a decision based in condemning the rest of the world and possibly your own people because you refuse to do what what needs to be done.
That would have been much more
yeah.
to Galadriel's point. But you're right, it is a lot less soundbitey. Actually, I think honestly that would be one of those things that like Tolkien would probably have taken the time to say it right.
Yeah.
That's one of the differences between Tolkien and what we have as modern.
Yeah. I have Theo hiding. No orcs have gotten thirsty in the last few hours and checked the well. Also, it's nighttime now. The best time to run from orcs.
I think I had that exact same note.
Yeah.
I think I literally wrote that same thing. What did I say? You know when's the best time to sneak around orcs? Definitely nighttime.
And then my next note is like maybe you should give up the grain bag because he keeps like tripping and stumbling and can't hold on to the grain bag and almost gets caught a million times. Like you'd move so much faster and so much quieter.
Oh, the grain bag is the sword though. Shoot. Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
But the grain bag is the sword. I think we would reveal that later on. But
again, he couldn't find a better place to hide the sword. So again, okay, if the sword is in this grain bag, that sword was 4 feet long when he came running out of this building earlier. This grain bag is not a place you're going to hide a 4-foot sword. How quickly is it a lightsaber that you just poke it with blood, it grows into a big sword, and then you...
I don't know, do we ever see it shrink? I don't think
No,
we ever
we
see
don't.
it shrink. Yeah.
No,
It
no.
only ever reconstitutes. It
Yeah.
never really deconstitutes. Sorry, I'm trying to save your couch.
That's fine. This is pretty easy to clean, so if it can't be helped, it can't be helped. But again, he's grabbing like a 30-pound grain bag. Like, if the sword is in there, pull the sword out, because you're going to run much faster with an 8-ounce sword hilt than you are with a 30-pound bag
Oh,
of
it
grain.
had grain come out of it though.
Yeah, and it does have grain come out. So yeah, there is grain in it.
Yeah.
So again, even if that's where the sword is.
Yeah.
And then I have Deus Ex Machina Rescue from Arendelle.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason I specifically point that out is because we have so many Deus Ex Machina moments throughout the rest of the show. But I do say I am okay with this one because they set up Arendelle.
Mm-hmm.
They set up his return with that scene with Adar earlier. So this one I'm actually okay with. And again, sometimes I get it. You just have to move the story along. But when it feels like just moving the story along is how you get out of everything, that's when I have issues. But this one I actually liked and I'm okay with.
I mean, like, even in the Peter Jackson films, they kind of use that. They use that motif a lot. In the books, it's different, right? Because when people magically show up at the right time, it's on page, and you just kind of, like, are okay with it. You're more okay with it when it's on the pages, right?
Yeah.
But even in the Peter Jackson film, they did that a lot, where people just show up at the most opportune time.
Yeah.
But
they set it up better there because again, it's Gandalf goes to find the Rohirrim. They light the beacons of Gondor to summon Rohan to go fight at Minas Tirith. So like they show up at the perfect time for the turning of the battle and for the sake of the story. But at least they set up the idea that they're on their way.
Yeah.
Like they set up the fact that he's on his way here, which is why I'm okay with this one.
Yeah.
I do say that the arrow catch is cool. He does some things that I think are pushing it, but the arrow catch was cool.
I was gonna say, like, this is one of those things. Is like anytime we see an elf do something that's physically ridiculous, I'm like, but Legolas, like, listen, all you Lord of the Rings fans out there who are like,
The most extreme thing Legolas did was the Oliphant. And that, like...
and he mounted the horse the wrong way, and he slid down a staircase on a snowboard, and he did...
Yeah, but they're light and agile and dexterous.
He did so many ridiculous things. It's just like, elves are just cool. Can we just let elves be cool? Because I'm cool with elves being cool. I was a 13-year-old boy once too, and I was like, oh, elves are the coolest because they're the nimblest, they're the quickest, they're the sharpest, they're the smartest. I wanted to be an elf when I was a kid too.
Aragorn was always my favorite.
I love this as a detail that he used his last arrow, and so their backs are against the wall, air quotes, because he's out of arrows.
Yeah.
And so he pulls out the sword. Because at first glance, you might be like, oh, how lucky of them to just walk out into the sun.
Yeah.
But, like, he just used his last arrow. You can keep track of him throughout the shot. It's literally the aliens, because I just watched Aliens, Romulus, and I was commenting on how they always have the shots where they show you the ammo on the side, and you get to watch the ammo go down. So they did the equivalent of that with that whole, like, running through the forest, where you get to count the arrows he's shooting. You're like, oh no, he's gonna run out. He ran out, and he's like, oh, he's gonna go to his last resort is fighting orcs with a sword. Yeah, that's a bad idea. And then we get saved by the sun, which is, again,
a Deus Ex Machina rescue.
Yeah.
And also, didn't the orcs have arrows when they were in the trees? Why do the orcs suddenly not have arrows once they're at the edge of the trees? I feel like
maybe they didn't want to give him more arrows because he was using them so much better than they were.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, if we fire arrows at him, we die.
So don't shoot them at him. Shoot them at the kid and the woman that he's standing in
did.
front
He
of.
caught him. They tried to shoot the kid. They're like, that's easy pickings.
But now the orcs have tree cover and he doesn't. Whereas before they were all in the trees, so it was a whole thing.
Maybe.
Back in Khazad-dûm, funeral thing. I have vibrato doesn't come from your chin, otherwise it's a fine scene.
Oh, this for this?
Yeah.
Well, she's actually singing that, though.
Yeah. But she, like, chews with her chin.
Yeah. Maybe, I think she's actually singing that, though. So, whatever technique she's using. I don't know. I'm not a music major.
Right there,
so
there's the
that one.
chin shake. Yeah.
I concede I have no musical knowledge, so.
I have a degree in singing, and I was never taught to shake my chin for vibrato.
Yeah.
But you know, maybe. I mean, there are, I'm sure, techniques I don't know and haven't learned.
Yeah.
Having a degree in something does not mean that you know more about it than somebody else, or that you're a better authority. It implies it, but it's not a hard fast rule. Fine scene otherwise, and then we have this kind of. Who's Elrond talking to?
Tisa?
Yeah. He is. Oh, here Doran comes in. I thought this note was about a conversation you had with Doran. I like even the hottest coals can cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then I do like that Doran takes that, instead of being about being patient with his father, about wishing he was more assertive with himself. I do think that's a good dialogue use and then rotation of intention there.
My father single-handedly sailed to Balin.
Oh, that's my notice. I have, like, my dad can beat up your dad.
I have a note here that's just like, dads, am I right?
Yeah. And then ultimately his takeaway is, like, you know, appreciate the relationship you have while you still have it.
Yeah.
Because Elrond doesn't have his father anymore. Yeah. Ultimately, good takeaway. There's a funny anecdote in here about how Elrond and Doran met.
Yeah, I think especially with that as like the end cap of this whole sequence, again just pointing out all the cool poetic moments that I like. The times when theme just repeats itself throughout. It's like the power of relationships and connection. Like Durin by himself, turning towards a dark path, but it's that having people in your life who love you and care about you. It's the isolationism versus the relationships. The relationships are what can ground you and lead you towards good. Mm-hmm. And isolationism is what tends to let you get inside your own head. And I mean, that's where the turn of phrase asshole comes from. You're too much inside your own head. So, like, you need the outside to help steer you.
Yeah.
So I love that repeat of the power of relationships. Friendship!
And then I have with the King Doran scene, no notes. Do you have any notes there?
Nope. Good. Other than it's cool.
So then we're back with the humans. Is Waldreg Sauron? We know that he's not. But, and then, oh no, it just seems to be a servant of Sauron. Is not Gandalf Sauron? Why do I have that note? Let's get to the end of this next scene. Do you have notes about the Southlands?
I have one note. I think it's cool that Waldreg points out that is the key, the sword, is fashioned by the master, aka Sauron. It's just a nice little way to remind the viewer. Remember, he's a smith. That might be important. And that he really likes swords. That might be important. And so that, you know, we understand that the volcano erupting has always been Sauron's, one of his end games. And how, and this comes back to the reading of Adar. Is he in on it? Or did he just get privy to it? I don't know. But yeah, it's that was one of the sequences, that piece of information with Waldreg confirming that the key is made by Sauron, therefore this plan is Sauron's plan. at some point is definitely what leads me to believe that Adar is in cahoots and playing a part of Sauron's game.
See, I'm going to go with, if Sauron's original plan was erupt the volcano, black out the sky, because the orcs need a place where they can live and exist to go about, like, building toward their own future, even if that future is war and conquest, they still need a place where they can do that safely. So
Redemption
Adar.
arc.
So what's that?
So redemption arc?
Yeah. Yeah. No. It's if we're gonna go out and conquer Middle Earth, we need a place where we can base up, build up, gain our strength, and then go out and conquer Middle Earth. So Adar is effectively just going with, we need a place where we can be safe, and then we're just gonna be safe. So it's still, so they don't have to necessarily, he doesn't have to be doing Sauron's plan to go, this aspect of Sauron's plan is still a good thing for these people.
And so that would be the Adar not working with Sauron angle, which again in season 1 we don't get confirmation of, and you know it's one of those things. It's like, there's nothing in season 1 that confirms one way or the other, but I definitely think that's a valid understanding.
And then Numenor 2, I have good scene overall, but note, Halbrand is staying. He is not going with her. So as far as the whole him using her to get back to Middle Earth thing, I think this is another point in the he just wants to stay in Numenor and be a humble blacksmith.
Well, that's why, like,
defense.
I think his original plan, based on everything I'm saying, is he wanted to end up in Numenor. He wanted to make the Rings of Power here, or at the very least corrupt the men here, because Sauron wants to control as much as possible, but the Numenor is the ripe fruit. Like, the Whispers have been here working their magic for a while, so Numenor is still a valid target. I don't know what. Maybe we'll get confirmation of what his timeline was in next season or in another season. Or probably, I suspect this is going to be like one of those things. Whenever Numenor actually flips, that's when we'll actually get Sauron's take on it.
Yeah.
But I think based off of everything I'm seeing here, my interpretation was always like, okay, Sauron intended to do his craft here in Numenor, and then Galadriel has kind of been like, she's just a really, really powerful pawn. It's kind of like, again, playing chess, to use the chess analogy. Like, he's like, oh, I think I do kind of want a queen on my chessboard, and like Galadriel fulfills the queen part. He's like, oh yeah, I could definitely use you. You're very manipulatable.
See, I'm gonna go with, I think that he makes that choice after she forces his hand to go back to Middle Earth.
I also see that, like, again, he never says that he's the king of the Southlands. He never states what his intention is to her anywhere. He doesn't do that with any character. He never states his real intention. He lets them fill in the gaps and say what he wants. He essentially lets them have the idea for themselves, even though he put it there in their head.
Yeah.
And so, like, I don't know. In season 1, in this episode, I don't think we see the setup for it. But I'm also, like, I know this is Sauron's character. I wouldn't be surprised if you went back and talked to the directors, if their intention was for Sauron to have let Galadriel come to that conclusion on her own, in giant air quotes, and it was actually his idea. But because the actor for Halbrand / Sauron is so phenomenal. This is one of the greatest tragedies, I think, of season 1. Is like, I heard somewhere that they didn't even tell him that he was Sauron.
Oh yeah.
Until they were already filming. So he was playing Halbrand straight.
Yeah.
And that was his direction on camera, was to play Halbrand straight, as we're surface level meant to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not until later on that we find out he's Sauron. You go back and you go like, oh yeah, that's why all these lines were done so deliberately, and they had to be stacked a certain way. But anyways, I think that's one of the greatest tragedies, is they tried to do the greatest aha got you with like trying to make the stranger who you thought was going to be Sauron, and trying to make Halbrand who you thought was going to be Aragorn, so you thought you knew how it was supposed to go, and then flipping it on the like last episode. But unfortunately, it just made it more confusing by how good the actor is who played Halbrand, because he's so charismatic, and he plays Halbrand, and you believe the words that come out of his mouth. You're like, yeah, I can totally see with your delivery and your like if he played it even a little bit more sinister, like I think we would all be kind of like, okay, he's up to no good, like the whole time, and then none of the payoff would be worth it. But this is just one of those tragedies of how this all ends up playing out, is the actor does such a great job of playing Halbrand that I don't think we see. I've never been convinced. I've never seen an example of, for my interpretation, that says this was his idea planted in Galadriel's head for sure. But I definitely think it's left open for that reading.
Yeah. Farazan here says that their ships will depart in 10 days. I'm sure that will come up later.
Oh.
In the meantime, we're just wrapping up this scene in Numenor. Any further points on this scene? Any closing thoughts about the episode?
Numenor. I love the little dash of Elvish between friends as a departing gift between Sildur's dad and Elendil and Galadriel. At some point, I think Farazan is talking with the queen, and the writing for his dialogue is very similar to that of Wormtongue's, and I was like, aha, I see you, that's cool.
I don't think he speaks directly to the queen. He talks like over this crowd of people here. Our queen has laid bare her intent is a little Wormtongue-y. Maybe
I think that's what I was referencing. Anyways, not a hard point, but it was one of those things where when I saw it, I was like, cool, I like that. Nice dash of letting you know who you're dealing with.
That's everything I have for this episode. Any final bits? Cool. This will likely be our shortest episode yet, which is not hard to achieve because we tend to talk a lot. So comment, like, subscribe, tell us what you liked, tell us what you didn't like. If you want to debate stuff.
If you want to agree with us on stuff, agree with us on stuff.
If you want to disagree with us, you'll probably be agreeing with the other, so it works either way.
You just can't get away from it.
You just can't win.
One of the things that Lance brought up in the last one, and just to repeat it here, is we prefer that you keep it civil, but of course, if you choose to be rude, just know that people will probably reply to you in turn
in a rude way.